My name is Kate, and I've been a police officer for over a decade. The precinct was my home, my colleagues were my family, and the relentless pursuit of justice was my purpose. That life was straightforward until I met Michael. He was everything I didn't know I was looking for: charming, kind, and incredibly supportive of my demanding career. Our first meeting was nothing short of unconventional. It was at a charity event for the local police force. I was in uniform, representing our department. "Michael, excuse me. I'm officer." He approached me with a confident smile. "Could you tell me more about what you do?" "I've always been fascinated by law enforcement." "Male? Really?" "Most people usually just ask if I've ever shot someone," I replied, half joking. He laughed. "Michael and Albrecht, I'm interested in the real work you do. At the stuff that matters." We talked for hours that night, about everything from police work to our favorite movies. He wasn't intimidated by my job, and I wasn't put off by his curiosity. It was a connection neither of us expected. Michael introduced me to his mother, Martha, a few months into our relationship. I could tell from our first meeting that she didn't approve of me. "Martha, you're a police officer, dear," she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. "That's a rather dangerous job for a young lady." "It's my passion, ma'am," I replied, trying to stay polite. "Martha, interesting," she said, her eyes narrowing. "But I hope you won't put my son in any danger." "Michael, Ma. Kate's job is something to be proud of," Michael interjected, sensing the tension. "Is making a real difference." Despite Martha's reservations, Michael and I fell deeply in love. We were a team and nothing seemed to stand in our way. But looking back, I realized that Martha's initial attitude was a sign of things to come. Her dislike for me was not a passing judgment, but a deep-seated resentment that would later turn my life into a living nightmare. We planned our wedding with excitement, choosing the perfect venue, the most beautiful flowers, and inviting all our friends and family. But in the back of my mind, Martha's cold gaze lingered. I brushed it off as mere nerves, not realizing that the wedding was only the beginning of a dark chapter in my life. Michael and I were about to embark on a journey that would test us in ways we never anticipated. At the fancy wedding, the love we shared, all of it was about to be overshadowed by a secret that would shake our very foundation. In this struggle, my experience as a police officer would prove invaluable, but it would also expose the cracks in my relationship that I never knew existed. But all of that was still ahead of me, waiting to unfold on the very day I thought would be the happiest of my life. The day had finally come. After months of planning, it was time for Michael and me to say our vows. Excitement in the air was palpable, yet so was the tension, and my uniform was replaced by a beautiful white gown, but my instincts as a police officer never left me. I could sense something was amiss, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The church was decorated with delicate white roses, and the soft glow of the candles created a magical atmosphere. Our friends and family were all there, beaming with joy, but Martha's eyes were like ice. "Sarah Kate, you look stunning. My best friend and fellow officer," Sarah exclaimed as she helped me with my veil. "Looking like me, thank you." "Sarah, I just wish I could shake this weird feeling about Martha," I confessed. "Sarah, don't let her ruin your day. The kiss on Michael and the love you two share," she reassured me. The ceremony was breathtaking. Michael looked dashing, and as we exchanged our vows, I could see the love in his eyes. "Michael, I promise to stand by you, to support you and to love you unconditionally," Michael declared, his voice filled with emotion. "I promise to be your partner in all things, to face challenges together, and to love you with all my heart," I replied, tears welling in my eyes. We sealed our promises with a kiss, and the congregation erupted into cheers. But Martha's applause was weak, her smile forced. I could see her whispering to Michael's sister, but I tried to ignore it. At the reception, the tension became unbearable. Guests were dancing and enjoying themselves, but Martha's presence loomed large. I decided to confront her. "Rate me. Martha, is everything all right?" "You seem uncomfortable," I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked me up and down, her lips curling into a sneer. "Martha, oh, I'm fine, dear. Just wondering what my son sees in a police officer like you." I was taken aback by her bluntness, but managed to reply. "Me, I love your son. Right, Martha, and he loves me. That's all that matters. Rail conquer, Martha, is it?" She shot back, her voice dripping with disdain. "I just hope you don't drag him into your dangerous world." "Michael, Mom, enough." Michael intervened, his voice firm. Martha just huffed and walked away, leaving us both stunned. But the rest of the evening was a blur. The toasts, the dancing, even cutting the cake felt overshadowed by Martha's cold attitude. Michael tried to lift my spirits, but I couldn't shake the feeling that our marriage had started on a sour note. That night, as we left for our honeymoon, I looked back at the beautiful venue and all I could see was Martha's cold eyes, filled with disapproval. But Retaliation for me, the woman who is now my mother-in-law, had made her feelings clear, and I knew that our future together would be anything but smooth. Our wedding was supposed to be the beginning of our happily ever after, but instead, it had sown the seeds of a battle I never expected to fight. For a battle that would test my love, my integrity, and my strength as a police officer. A battle that had only just begun. Moving in with Martha was a decision born out of necessity, not desire. Michael's father had passed away a few years ago, and he felt obligated to take care of his mother. But from the very first day, I realized that living under the same roof as Martha was going to be far from easy. The house itself was beautiful, filled with memories of Michael's childhood. But those memories were overshadowed by Martha's dominating presence. She had a way of making everything about herself, turning even the most trivial tasks into a battleground. "Martha, Kate, why is this house such a mess? Clean it up," she'd yell early in the morning, startling me out of sleep. "May, I'm doing my best." Martha, Michael and I are both working, and we can't be here all the time, I'd reply, trying to keep my cool. Right, Martha, that's no excuse. This house used to be spotless when my husband was alive, she'd retort, her eyes filled with reproach. But the situation escalated quickly. Martha's demands grew more unreasonable, her criticism more biting. For saying my police training had prepared me for criminals, but nothing could prepare me for Martha's relentless onslaught. Hey Martha, what's this? Kite? A kavai grave dinner. My son deserves better, she'd complain, throwing the food into the trash. I'd to sitting to Martha, I just worked a 12-hour shift. I'm doing the best I can, I'd argue, my patience wearing thin. Right, Martha, you call this your best? Pathetic, she'd snap, leaving the room in a huff. Michael tried to intervene, to stand up for me, but his attempts were in vain. His love for his mother clouded his judgment, and he often ended up caught in the crossfire. Michael, Mom, please, let's be reasonable. Kate's doing a lot for this family. You need to appreciate her efforts, he'd plead. Martha, I'll appreciate her when she starts acting like a proper wife, Martha would retort, her voice dripping with contempt. Our marriage, once filled with love and understanding, was slowly crumbling under Martha's relentless pressure. We began to argue not about us, but about her. Martha became the invisible third person in our relationship, a wedge driving us apart. The days turned into a nightmare, a never-ending cycle of demands, arguments, and tears. My strength as a police officer seemed useless against Martha's emotional manipulation. She had a way of making me feel small, inadequate, and worthless. And yet, I persevered. I loved Michael, and I wanted our marriage to work. But the strain was taking its toll on both of us. Our home, once a sanctuary, had become a battlefield. As the weeks wore on, I knew something had to give. I couldn't continue living this way, walking on eggshells, constantly fearing Martha's next outburst. I needed to take control, to stand up for myself, and to fight back. I'm sorry, but the biggest battle was still ahead of me, a discovery that would turn my world upside down and set me on a path I never expected to walk. Living with Martha was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about family, love, and justice. I was a police officer, trained to face danger and adversity. But nothing in my career had prepared me for the battle within my own home. This is a battle that was about to take a dark and unexpected turn. Exercising is a day like any other in Martha's house. Tense, exhausting, and filled with a never-ending list of chores. Michael was at work, and I was cleaning up after another one of Martha's tirades. Martha, you missed a spot. Kate, she'd say, pointing at a barely noticeable mark on the floor. You're really slipping. Wait, me. I'm doing my best. Martha, I'd respond through gritted teeth, my patience running thin. Wait, I'm doing my best. Martha, I'd respond through gritted teeth, my patience running thin.
Martha, your best isn't good enough, she'd retort, her voice dripping with disdain.
It was while cleaning the kitchen in a cupboard that Martha always kept locked that I stumbled upon something that made my heart stop. I'd accidentally knocked over a jar, and behind it, hidden from view, was a small package wrapped in plastic. Curiosity piqued, my instincts as a police officer kicked in. I carefully unwrapped the package and found drugs a substantial amount. My blood ran cold.
"Martha, what's that you have there, dear?" Bertha's voice rang out from behind me, a hint of panic in her tone.
Martha, what is this? Why are there drugs in your cupboard? I demanded, holding up the package.
"Martha, that's none of your business. You nosy girl." She snapped, her face turning red with rage. "How dare you snoop around my house?"
May, your house? We live here too. And having drugs in the house is everyone's business.
Right, Martha? You don't understand, and you never will. You're a disappointment to this family because you're a police officer. You should leave this house and never come back." Martha yelled, her voice filled with venom.
I was stunned, the words cutting me to the core. Achikin Martha a Terran? I can't ignore this. I have to report it, I said, my voice trembling.
"Martha, go ahead. Ruin our family. You've already taken my son from me. Why not destroy everything else?" She screamed, tears streaming down her face.
But my hands shaking, I called Michael and told him what I found. He was as shocked as I was, but he stood by me.
Michael, Kate, you have to do what's right. We can't ignore this. It's painful, but we have to face it, he said, his voice filled with anguish.
That night, I reported the discovery to my precinct. The wheels of justice began to turn, and I knew that our lives would never be the same again. The discovery of the drugs was more than a betrayal. It was a declaration of war. First thing, Martha had drawn a line in the sand, and I had no choice but to cross it. Our home was no longer a battlefield. It was a war zone. A war between family and duty, love and justice. Just a war that was about to reach its tipping point. As a people, I was no longer just a daughter-in-law caught in a family feud. I was a police officer, sworn to uphold the law. This to the crown it, a law that had been broken by the very person I had tried so hard to please. The storm had been brewing for a long time, and now it was about to break. The battle with Martha was far from over. It was only just beginning. Revenge is a word that had never resonated with me. As a police officer, my job was to protect and serve, to uphold the law without personal bias. But Martha's betrayal had turned my world upside down. It was not just an offense against the law, it was a personal affront. Her constant berating, her hidden secrets, and her unfounded hatred had pushed me to a place I never thought I'd find myself. A place where justice and revenge intertwined. After I reported the discovery to my superiors, an investigation was launched. And my colleagues were supportive but wary, understanding the complexity of prosecuting a family member.
Jacob Crostons, are you sure about this? Tape? This could get ugly, my partner. James warned.
I know, but I can't ignore it. This is about more than just Martha. It's about what's right, I replied, determination in my voice. The day finally arrived when the police came to our house. That's the look on Martha's face when they handcuffed her was a mixture of shock and defiance. Her eyes met mine, filled with accusation. Martha, you've destroyed this family. Kate, I hope you're happy, she spat, venom in her voice. Stains, I did what I had to do. You brought this on yourself, I retorted, my voice steady, but my heart aching.
Michael stood by me, his face pale and his eyes filled with a sadness I hadn't seen before. Michael, I love you. Kate, and I trust you. But this is tearing me apart, he whispered, tears in his eyes.
A term Nesterks, I know. Drake, Michael, but we have to do what's right. Even when it hurts, I said, holding him close. The trial was a drawn-out, agonizing process. Fuck me, every day. I was torn between the principles I had sworn to uphold as a police officer and the pain it was causing my family. The courtroom was filled with tension, with Martha's cold eyes constantly fixed on me, her glare filled with accusation. To me, the prosecution laid out the evidence methodically, detailing the amount of drugs found in Martha's possession and the circumstances of their discovery. Matisse, Prosecutor Officer Kate Thompson, could you please describe the day you found the illegal substances in Mrs. Martha Thompson's cupboard? The prosecutor asked, his voice firm. I was cleaning the kitchen and I stumbled upon the drugs hidden behind a jar. I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I knew what it was, and I knew I had to report it. Me, prosecutor, how did Mrs. Thompson react when you confronted her? He continued. Basically, she was angry and told me it was none of my business. She yelled at me, told me I was a disappointment, and asked me to leave the house. I recounted, tears welling in my eyes. The defense attorney was ruthless in cross-examination, twisting my words, trying to paint me as a vengeful daughter-in-law. Prosecutor, isn't it true, Officer Thompson, that you never got along with Mrs. Thompson? Hermit spiels to detections isn't me, that you had a motive to frame her? He asked, his voice dripping with insinuation. No, that's not true. I tried to get along with her. I found the drugs by accident, not out of malice. I protested, my voice rising.
Prosecutor, objection. Prosecutor, Your Honor. Prosecutor, leading the witness.
Budge overruled. Budge, continue, the judge said, his face stern.
The trial continued, with witnesses and experts testifying, each day becoming a blur of legal jargon and emotional turmoil. Michael was called to the stand, and his testimony was heartbreaking. To be, Attorney Mr. Thompson, how would you describe your mother's relationship with your wife? Me, the defense attorney asked, his voice soft. Agree, me, Michael, it was difficult. At me, my mother accepted Kate. But that doesn't mean she's guilty of this crime. Michael replied, his voice breaking. Excuse me, attorney, did you ever witness any friction between them? Rate me, any arguments? B. The defense pressed on. Ask me, Michael, yes, they argued, but that doesn't make my wife a liar. B. She's an honorable police officer, and she did what she thought was right, Michael said, his voice filled with conviction. Telling Michael, yes, they argued, but that doesn't make my wife a liar. She's an honorable police officer, and she did what she thought was right, Michael said, his voice filled with conviction. The closing arguments were passionate, both sides making their case. The jury deliberated, and the waiting was excruciating. That to the fear that Martha might be acquitted weighed heavily on me. Finally, the verdict came. The guilty. Martha's face was ashen as the judge handed down the sentence. Touch. Mrs. Thompson, you've been found guilty of possession with intent to distribute. You are hereby sentenced to 1 year in prison, he declared, his voice unwavering. As the gavel fell, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but the cost was high. My marriage was strained, my trust in family shattered. Martha, I hope you're happy now, Martha whispered as she was led away, her eyes filled with hatred. I did what I had to do, I replied quietly, my heart heavy. That the trial was over, but the scars it left were deep and lasting. The path to healing was long and uncertain, and I knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But I also knew that I had done the right thing, and that knowledge was a beacon of hope in the darkness. It was a reminder that justice, no matter how painful, was a value worth fighting for. Just realizing that I was covering his living expenses, my husband really regretted it. Entering the morning sun broke through the delicate curtains, casting warm beams across the room. It was my wedding day, the supposed happiest day of a woman's life. I had waited for this moment ever since Daniel and I had met at a mutual friends gathering about 2 years ago. Olivia Harrison thought I was about to marry the man of my dreams. But life has a funny way of showing you that dreams often come with nightmares you didn't sign up for. Picture in my case, the nightmare wore floral prints and answered to the name Eleanor. Daniel's mother. I had always been an independent woman, carving my own path in the digital marketing world. As my profession allowed me to work from home, earning a good $10,000 a month. Yet, I had always longed for companionship, someone to share my joys and sorrows. Daniel filled that void with his charming smile and seemingly kind nature. That is until his mother entered the frame. Getting ready for the ceremony, I slipped into my gown, a beautiful white piece that fit me like a second skin. It was elegant, not too extravagant, and made me feel like I was floating on air. Lisa, mimosas are ready. Olivia, my maid of honor. Lisa called out as she stepped into the room. You look amazing. May, thank you. Lisa, I feel amazing, I replied, glancing at my reflection one more time. But as Lisa handed me the mimosa, the door swung open and in walked Eleanor, her eyes scanning the room as if looking for something wrong. Ops me, Ah, there you are, she said, approaching me. I was worried that dress might not fit. You've always had a bit more cushion than most women Daniel has dated. I smiled, teeth gritted. Well, it fits perfectly, thank you. Lisa, sensing the tension, tried to divert the conversation. Lisa, we were just about to toast for good luck. Eleanor took a sip from her glass and grimaced. Eleanor? It's a bit strong. But then, perhaps you need it. Weddings can be stressful, and you have so much to worry about, especially you, Olivia. Mate, what do you mean? I asked, gripping the stem of the glass tightly. Eleanor. Oh, first marriages are always tough, she quipped, eyeing me from head to toe. But don't worry if things don't work out, there's always a second time. Daniel walked in at that moment, his eyes meeting mine, full of excitement and anticipation. Daniel, Olivia, are you two getting along? Matthew accessory tenure. Of course, Eleanor answered before I could say anything, her voice dripping with folk sweetness. I was just giving Olivia some advice. He leaned in and kissed me softly on the lips. See you at the altar, beautiful. As he left, I couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling that settled over me. Here I was, moments away from one of the most significant milestones in my life, yet the looming presence of Eleanor cast a shadow over my happiness. Little did I know then that this was just a preamble of what was to come, a sneak preview into a feature-length film of manipulation and deceit. Eleanor turned to leave, but not before landing her final punch. Eleanor, take good care of my boy. Olivia, he deserves the best, but I brushed it off, refocusing on the promise of happiness that seemed so close, and yet, as I would learn, was so far away. The ceremony went on as planned, and as I said, I do, looking into Daniel's eyes. I truly believed that our life together would be as beautiful as the gown that trailed behind me down the aisle. I couldn't have been more wrong. As the guests showered us with confetti and good wishes, I took a deep breath, not realizing that it would be one of the last carefree breaths I'd take for a while. That the seed of discord had been sown, and as Eleanor hugged her son and then awkwardly patted me on the back, I felt the first thread of my dream life unravel. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a hidden agenda, behind cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. As Daniel and I drove off to our honeymoon, leaving the crowd of cheering friends and family behind, I took one last look at Eleanor. She stood there, waving us off, but her eyes were not on her son. They were fixed on me, calculating, planning, and preparing for the next act in a drama I didn't even know I was cast in. We returned from our honeymoon sun-kissed and full of euphoria. The past 2 weeks felt like a prolonged dream. Endless beaches, tropical cocktails, and most importantly, no Eleanor. Daniel and I were so wrapped up in each other that I almost forgot about the looming cloud that his mother cast over our lives. Almost. Coming back, we settled into my house. I had bought it a few years prior when my online business began to take off. The idea was to turn it into a warm, loving home where we'd start a family. But before we could even unpack all our suitcases, a loud knock echoed through the house. It was a weekday afternoon, and I had just wrapped up a client call. Daniel was at the grocery store, and I was alone. I wonder who that could be, I muttered to myself, walking toward the door. Opening it, I found Eleanor standing there, her face a mix of determination and, oddly enough, a hint of desperation. For behind her were 2 bulging suitcases. "May I come in?" she asked, not waiting for my reply as she pushed her way into the living room. "My foot brings you here, Eleanor? Is everything all right?" And I inquired, trying to mask the surprise and irritation flooding my senses. "Oh, everything's just fine. I've decided it's high time I spent some quality moments with my only son and his new wife," she announced. I felt my heart sink. "Oh, I see. And how long do you plan to visit?" "Visit? Dear, I'm moving in." At that moment, the front door opened and Daniel walked in, grocery bags in hand. His eyes met mine first, filled with questions, and then shifted to his mother and her luggage. "Nan? What's going on?" "I've come to live with you, dear." A mother should be close to her son, especially in the early years of his marriage. "Daniel, I appreciate that. But don't you think you should consult us first?" Daniel seemed a bit taken aback, but there was a lack of firmness in his voice that made my stomach churn. Well, I felt cornered, my space invaded, but I was most shocked by Daniel's hesitancy to stand his ground. As much as I wanted to protest, I glanced at Daniel, silently begging him to speak up. "Daniel, well, if Olivia is okay with it, I suppose it's fine. I guess it's fine for a short while," I reluctantly agreed, choosing my battles but marking this as a red flag. And just like that, Eleanor became the uninvited house guest who had no intentions of leaving. My home, my sanctuary, morphed into a war zone. Earth to the walls that once held framed photos of happy memories now felt like they were closing in on me. But Eleanor didn't stop at merely moving in. No, she had more planned. She soon took it upon herself to criticize my cooking, belittle my job, and question my suitability as a wife for her precious son. And each time I looked at Daniel for support, I found none. He had changed, or maybe he was never the man I thought he was. Weeks passed, and I began to feel like a stranger in my own home. So my office, where I managed to make more in a month than Eleanor probably had in a year, became my only sanctuary. I started to dread dinner times and avoided using the living room as much as possible, just to escape her snide remarks and piercing stares. Felt like I was losing myself, losing my marriage, and worse, losing respect for the man I had vowed to spend the rest of my life with. And it all began that fateful afternoon when Eleanor rolled her luggage into my life, without an invitation. That's when I knew something had to change. And my home, my marriage, and my peace of mind were at stake. But what I didn't know then was just how far Eleanor and Daniel were willing to go to make my life a living hell. And so, with a heavy heart but a resolve of steel, I decided that enough was enough. The house I once loved began to feel like a prison, with Eleanor as the warden and Daniel as her dutiful prison guard. My morning started with Eleanor's grating voice echoing through the hallway, instructing me on how to do chores properly, as if running a successful online business wasn't enough of an accomplishment. Daniel, for his part, seemed increasingly distant. He would nod along to whatever his mother said, adding to my sense of isolation. During one evening, after spending the day locked in my office, tackling work calls and client emails, I came down to the living room and found Eleanor rearranging the furniture. "Eleanor's Olivia, come here." Eleanor beckoned as she scrutinized the room like a general surveying her troops. "Demi, what are you two doing?" I asked, bewildered at the transformation happening in my own living room. Eleanor's, "Well, dear, I thought the house needed a bit of a feminine touch. Your taste is so modern." "Oh, offense," she smirked. "Outmenopromedy, and you." I turned to Daniel, seeking an explanation or even a shred of solidarity. "Daniel, I thought it'd be nice to let Mom add her touch to the place. You know, make it feel more like a family home." Daniel responded, avoiding eye contact. This felt like the final straw. It's me. "Well, it's my house, and I like it the way it is." I didn't agree to any of this, I asserted, my voice tinged with an edge of desperation. "Daniel, oh come on, Olivia. It's not a big deal. Mom just wants to help make it cozy," Daniel said, finally locking eyes with me, but with an expression that read like an ultimatum. I retreated, knowing full well that my concerns fell on deaf ears. But what hurt most was that Daniel was now a part of this alliance against me, in my own home. So days turned into weeks, and Eleanor's oppression began to extend beyond the confines of the house. She started making snide comments about how a good wife would not be holed up in an office all day. In one particularly toxic evening, the three of us sat at the dinner table. The tension was palpable. Eleanor had cooked that night, some casserole dish that looked as unappealing as the atmosphere in the room. "Eleanor's, Olivia, dear, you hardly ate anything," Eleanor noted, peering into my almost untouched plate. "I can't imagine what you must be feeding my son if this doesn't suit your taste."
"Eleanor, Olivia, dear, you hardly ate anything," Eleanor noted, peering into my almost untouched plate. "I can't imagine what you must be feeding my son if this doesn't suit your taste."
"I know, Mom. Let it be," Daniel chimed in, but his tone was more irritated with me than it was defensive.
"No, Daniel, your mother is right. I'm sorry my work doesn't allow me the luxury to cook meals all day," I countered. "Thulster, that's archaic, Eleanor. Times have changed. For tax and for the record, my job supports this household, both of you." In fact, I said, barely managing to keep my voice steady. "Been support? Is that what you call this?" My eyes watered, but I held back the tears. Because from where I'm standing, this doesn't feel like support. It feels like I'm the only one carrying the weight here. Daniel didn't reply, and Eleanor smirked triumphantly, as if she had scored a point in a game only she was playing. Life in my own home had become a never-ending cycle of despair. Each day bled into the next, each confrontation worse than the last. It was suffocating, demoralizing, and Daniel seemed oblivious to my suffering, or worse, indifferent. I knew I couldn't go on living like this. This was no way to spend my days, much less build a marriage or a life. Every second I spent in that house was a moment stolen from me, each minute with Eleanor and Daniel a dagger in my back. A ticks. I had to escape this prison they'd built around me, but not without ensuring that justice was served. A plan began to form in my mind, a desperate last-ditch attempt to salvage my dignity and lay claim to my life. The air was heavy with silence. Every tick of the clock resounded like a drumbeat in my ears. I was at my wits' end, suffocating under the tyrannical rule of Eleanor and the indifferent complacency of Daniel. But the plan I had hatched was about to unfold. It would be the night that broke the proverbial camel's back. I cooked dinner, a simple pasta dish, my face hiding a smile with the thought that this would be one of the last meals we would share as a twisted family unit. We gathered around the table, Eleanor placing herself at the head as though this were her kingdom and she its reigning monarch. Eleanor, pasta again. Guessing how inventive, Eleanor commented snidely, twirling a forkful lazily as though it were beneath her.
Atrias, Daniel, sensing an impending storm, but unsure of its origin, took a more diplomatic route.
Daniel, it smells good. Olivia, thanks for cooking. I thought we could use a family meal to discuss a few things. Finances, I said, locking eyes with Daniel. You know, for such a traditional household, it's odd that the wife is the only breadwinner. Eleanor, well, it's not like you have a real job. Tapping on a keyboard doesn't count. Meinster me. Daniel, I think it's time we had open conversation about our financial contribution to this house. Daniel, what are you suggesting? Me. I suggest, I paused, choosing my words carefully, that you and your mother either find jobs or find another place to live.
Eleanor, you can't be serious. Eleanor erupted, her eyes wide with incredulity.
As a heart attack, I shot back. Daniel, Olivia, you can't just kick us out, Daniel said, his voice shaky but defiant. Wait, why not? It's my house. I pay the bills, I provide the food, and yet, I'm treated like an intruder in my own home.
Eleanor, you ungrateful wretch, Eleanor hissed. After everything I've done to make this house a home, and you want to throw me out?
Daniel, Olivia, you're taking it too far. If you have issue, we can talk about it, but you can't just throw us out. This was the last straw. This moment crystallized every ill feeling, every suppressed scream, every ignored plea for respect and dignity into a sharp, jagged point of no return. I looked at Daniel, really looked at him, and saw the man he had become. A puppet with his mother pulling the strings. That's where you're wrong, I said, feeling a mix of dread and liberation. I can throw you out because I've been the one carrying the load while being insulted, belittled, and disrespected in my own home. So yes, Daniel, I can and I will.
Daniel looked stunned, finally understanding the gravity of the situation.
But Eleanor, however, looked livid, as if she could set fire to the room with her eyes.
Daniel, well, if you're throwing us out, then you can consider this marriage over. Daniel spat out. Trust me, this marriage was over long before tonight, I replied, pushing back my chair and standing up. As I looked at the defeated faces before me, a newfound sense of empowerment washed over me. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my destiny, of my home, of my life. That the wheels of justice turned slowly, but grind exceedingly fine. Those words echoed in my mind as I walked into the courthouse, a knot of anticipation tightening in my stomach. Daniel and Eleanor were already there, nervously chatting with their attorney. But when they saw me, their eyes turned cold, a tacit acknowledgement of the battle lines that had been drawn. Inside the courtroom, I could feel the weight of the judge's gaze, impartial yet stern like a guardian of some sacred societal pact. My attorney, Lisa, gave me an encouraging nod as she sorted through the papers in front of her. Lisa, Your Honor, she began, we are here today because my client, Avia, seeks a divorce from her husband Daniel due to ongoing emotional abuse, manipulation, and financial exploitation. She also seeks damages for the emotional distress inflicted upon her by both her husband and mother-in-law. Eleanor scoffed audibly, unable to contain her disdain. Daniel glanced nervously at her, then back at me, realizing the gravity of the allegations. The judge turned his gaze to Daniel's attorney. Your response? Attorney, Your Honor, we categorically deny these allegations. We assert that Olivia is exaggerating these claims to gain an unfair advantage. In these proceedings, their attorney retorted. Judge. Well, let's get down to the facts then, said the judge, adjusting his glasses. Mrs. Olivia, can you please present your evidence? I've been waiting for this moment. Lisa played a series of audio recordings, conversations I had secretly recorded over the past few weeks. In them, Eleanor's shrill voice could be heard bullying me, criticizing everything from my cooking to my appearance. Daniel's voice followed, agreeing with her, and at times, insulting me as well. My eyes met Daniel's. He looked deflated, cornered. Eleanor stared at the floor, her face flushed red. The judge then looked at Daniel's attorney. Judge, do you have any counter-evidence or arguments? As they stammered, flipped through papers, but it was clear the evidence was irrefutable. Your Honor, I interrupted, I'd like to add one more thing. It's not just the emotional burden, it's the financial one as well. For the entire duration of our marriage, I have been the sole breadwinner. I work online, earning approximately $10,000 per month. Daniel and Eleanor neither contribute financially nor respect the work I do. In fact, I've been labeled as a freeloader in my own home. Lisa handed over bank statements, bills, and income proofs to the judge. After what seemed like an eternity, the judge finally spoke. After reviewing the evidence and hearing the arguments, I'm inclined to rule in favor of the petitioner, Olivia. Not only will a divorce be granted, but Daniel and Eleanor will have to vacate Olivia's property within 30 days. Moreover, due to the emotional damages sustained, I'm ordering Daniel and Eleanor to pay $20,000 in compensation. The courtroom went silent. I looked at Daniel and Eleanor, but their faces were a mixture of disbelief, shock, and bitter defeat. You may have lived as parasites, but you won't be leaving as victors, I said, locking eyes with them. As I walked out of the courtroom, a new chapter in my life opened. For so long, it seemed I had been drowning, stifled by the weight of my broken marriage and Eleanor's tyranny. But justice had been served, and the sweet air of freedom filled my lungs. That their Eleanor and Daniel, their comeuppance was both fitting and final. They had belittled. Months had passed since the court ruling. I was settling into my newfound freedom and independence. Everything seemed to be falling into place. A new project in the pipeline, quality time with friends and family, and the sheer joy of living life on my terms. My phone buzzed. Blitzing at it, I was surprised to see an unknown number flashing on the screen. Hesitantly, I answered. "It's the priorist Daniel. Is this Olivia?" A husky voice asked. "Ma'am, who is this?" I retorted, already sensing the dread creeping in. It was Daniel. "Me. What do you want?" "Daniel?" An voice wavered between irritation and disbelief. "Daniel, I think it's time we talked, don't you?" "I've got nothing to say to you," I snapped, ending the call. My heart pounded in my chest. A barrage of thoughts raced through my mind. How did he get my number? What could he possibly want? I refused to let this ghost from my past disturb my newfound peace. The days passed, but the unease remained. Till one evening, as I was leaving my office building, I felt an odd sensation. Like someone was watching me. I turned around, my eyes scanning the crowd, and there he was. Daniel. His appearance had changed. He looked disheveled and weary. Our eyes met. It was a fleeting moment, but it felt like an eternity. Not uttering a word, I got into my car and sped off. The unsettling encounter was a vivid reminder that my past could still intrude upon my present. Not wanting to live in fear, I contacted Lisa, my attorney, to discuss my options. Tell me, can he actually do anything? I inquired nervously during our meeting.
Lisa, legally, he can't touch you or the property. But if you ever feel threatened, don't hesitate to get a restraining order, Lisa advised.
I nodded, feeling somewhat reassured. I couldn't let the shadow of Daniel cloud my life any longer. But the universe had one more curveball to throw my way. Just a week later, as I was walking to my car in a grocery store parking lot, I heard a familiar voice. Asking me, "Why are you here?" "Eleanor," I asked, my voice laced with disdain.
Eleanor, it was Eleanor. Daniel's mother. She was alone, clutching a purse close to her chest, her eyes filled with a mixture of resentment and desperation.
"Anthony, we're struggling." "Olivia." I thought maybe you'd find it in your heart to help us, she muttered, almost pleadingly. But is that me? Help you? After everything you've done? You've got to be joking, I scoffed. Literally, we're family. Olivia, she insisted. Attainments. No, Eleanor, we're not. If family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me, I shot back, cutting her off. As I drove away, I felt a mixture of emotions, pity, disgust, but above all, relief. Seeing Eleanor and Daniel in such states reaffirmed my choices. I had taken control of my life, escaped a toxic situation, and come out the other side stronger and wiser. As I parked my car in the driveway of my home, I realized how far I had come. Gone were the days of walking on eggshells in my own house, of being belittled and manipulated by the people who were supposed to love me. The ghosts of my past had tried to haunt me, but they found a woman who had claimed her space, who had boundaries, and who had, most importantly, claimed her life back. I stepped into my home, locking the door behind me, both literally and metaphorically. I was locking up the toxic past, the nagging doubts, and the emotional baggage that had once held me captive. As I sat down on my couch, savoring the tranquility that now filled my home, I realized I was finally free. Free from the ghosts that sought to haunt me, free from the chains that had once bound me, and free to live a life that was entirely, beautifully mine. Daniel and Eleanor had once been haunting figures, shadows that darkened my life. But as I sat there, I knew that they had no power over me anymore. I had faced the ghosts from my past and emerged victorious. As I poured myself a glass of wine, it toasted to my freedom, to the challenges that had made me stronger, and to a future untainted by the ghosts of yesterday. And never set foot in their house again, but later regretted it. I'm Chloe, and I remember the day our parents' lawyer sat Max and me down, his face etched with sorrow, to tell us that we were now alone in the world. Losing our parents was like losing the sun and the moon. Our world was shrouded in darkness. We had each other, though. Ems was just 13 at the time, with wide, innocent eyes that looked to me for guidance. And as his big sister, I knew I had to fill the void left by our parents' absence. I'll take care of you, X, I promised him, holding his trembling hand. We'll get through this together. Will we be okay? We'll be more than okay, I reassured him, squeezing his hand. We'll make Mom and Dad proud. I worked multiple jobs, fighting against exhaustion and despair, all to make sure Max had everything he needed. He was my responsibility, my family, and my best friend. Our evenings were filled with laughter, tears, and endless talks about everything under the sun. Max was an ambitious young boy, passionate about his studies and full of dreams. He often talked about becoming a scientist or an engineer. Chloe, do you think I can build something that'll change the world? He'd ask, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Of course you can, Ax, I'd reply, ruffling his hair. You've the heart and the mind to achieve anything you set out to do. We built a small and content world for ourselves, filled with love and understanding. We celebrated small victories and comforted each other during failures. Despite our loss, we managed to find happiness in each other's companies. Our little apartment became a sanctuary, a place filled with memories, laughter, and endless support. Friends and relatives would visit us, marveling at our resilience. "Chloe, you're doing an incredible job with Max," Aunt Lucy would say, her eyes filled with admiration. "I Palisters, I'm just doing what needs to be done," I'd reply modestly, knowing that my love for Max was the driving force behind everything I did. Our bond grew stronger with each passing day. We were a team facing the world's challenges together. But little did I know that the strength of our relationship would be tested, that the love and trust we had built would face a storm that would change everything. Our story was just beginning, and I was blissfully unaware of the twists and turns that awaited us. But in those early days, all that mattered was Max's smile, his dreams, and our shared determination to make the best of our situation. That was our world, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything. Max's 18th birthday was a turning point. He'd grown into a strong, intelligent young man, and I was bursting with pride. The late-night study sessions, the shared dreams, and the promises of a bright future all culminated in this moment. I had managed to save enough money to buy Max a house, a place he could call his own. But it was a symbol of his coming of age, his independence, and my unwavering belief in him. Finding the perfect house was a challenge. I spent weeks scouring listings, visiting properties, and negotiating with real estate agents. Max had no idea about the surprise I was planning. First, the anticipation and excitement bubbled inside me like a well-kept secret. The day I handed Max the keys, I'll never forget the look on his face.
"Is this really mine, Chloe?" he asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. "Williams, it's all yours." "Max, happy birthday," I exclaimed, hugging him tightly. "But how did you? This must have cost a fortune," he stammered, tears glistening in his eyes.
"I've been saving for years, little brother. This is for you, for everything you've achieved, and for the incredible person you've become," I said, my own eyes welling up with emotion. The house itself was modest but filled with potential. It had 2 bedrooms, a cozy living room, a small garden, and most importantly, it was Max's. We spent the following weeks painting, furnishing, and transforming it into a home. Each brushstroke, each piece of furniture was a testament to our shared journey and love.
"Chloe, I want this room to be blue like the sea," Max would say, his eyes twinkling with excitement.
"Anything you want," say Max. "This is your canvas, your life. So make it as colorful as you wish," I'd reply, equally caught up in the joy of creation. We invited friends and family for a housewarming party, and their praises and congratulations filled the house with warmth.
"You've done something extraordinary," Chloe, Uncle John said, clapping me on the back. "This house is more than bricks and mortar. It's a symbol of your love and sacrifice."
I just wanted to give Max a chance to thrive. "Uncle John, he deserves the world," I replied, looking at my brother as he laughed with his friends. Our days were filled with hope, excitement, and a sense of accomplishment. Max started to embrace his new life, making plans and envisioning a future filled with possibilities. But as Max's life began to unfold in this new house, the dynamics of our relationship subtly started to shift. As the house, which was meant to be a beacon of joy and freedom, would eventually become the stage for unforeseen conflicts and the entry point for a person who would challenge the very fabric of our relationship. Yet, in those golden days of happiness and celebration, those shadows remained hidden, and we reveled in the triumph of a new beginning. As the days turned into weeks, Max began to settle into his new home and new life. The current relationship remained strong, but I could sense a newfound independence in him. He started going out more, meeting new people, and building a life of his own. One day, Max called me with excitement in his voice. "Max, Chloe, I've met someone. Her name's Emily, and she's amazing. I want you to meet her." My heart swelled with happiness for Max. "Me? That's wonderful. Right. I can't wait to meet her." We arranged a dinner at Max's new house, and I prepared myself to meet the girl who had captured my brother's heart. That's when the door swung open, and I was greeted by Emily's bright smile. Something inside me hesitated. It was a feeling I couldn't quite place, a shadow of doubt that lingered at the back of my mind. But I brushed it aside and embraced Emily warmly. "Acme, it's so nice to finally meet you." "Emily?" I exclaimed. "Emily, a pleasure's all mine." "Chloe," she replied, her voice sweet but with an undertone I couldn't quite identify. We sat down to dinner, and the conversation flowed easily at first. Emily was beautiful and charismatic, and she certainly knew how to command attention. "Emily, so, Chloe, I hear you've been playing mom to Max all these years. Must be tough being stuck in that role," Emily said, her words wrapped in a guise of curiosity. I was taken aback by her remark, but tried to keep my composure. "It's not about being stuck. Emily." Max seemed oblivious to the tension, laughing and chatting, his eyes fixed on Emily. As the evening wore on, Emily's comments became more pointed and condescending. She would slip inside digs about my job, my appearance, even my relationship with Max. "Emily, Chloe, don't you ever get tired of controlling everything in Max's life?" she asked at one point, her eyes narrowing. I don't control Max's life. Emily, I support him, just like any sister would, I replied, trying to hide the hurt in my voice. Emily, of course. I didn't mean it like that. I just think Max needs to grow up and make his own decisions, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. I looked at Max, hoping for some support, but he seemed to agree with Emily. Mike said slowly, Emily's right. I need to live my own life, make my own choices, his voice gentle but firm. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, the joyful anticipation replaced by a nagging discomfort. I left feeling bewildered and hurt, a rift growing between Max and me. As I drove home, Vitali's words echoed in my mind, her thinly veiled insults leaving a bitter taste. I knew deep down that things had changed. Max had found someone new, someone who seemed intent on driving a wedge between us. My brother, my best friend, was slipping away, and I was powerless to stop it. The chapter had closed on our perfect world, and a new uncertain one was beginning. It was a chapter filled with doubt, resentment, and a growing sense of loss. It was the chapter where Emily had entered our lives, and nothing would ever be the same again. Months flew by, and Max's relationship with Emily deepened. I felt like they were inseparable, and Emily's influence over Max became more apparent. Like my once close relationship with my brother started to fray at the edges, the warmth replaced by a cold distance. Exits the Pam's team the announcement. Max and Emily were getting married. Max said, Alex said Chloe. Emily and I are getting married. I want you to be there by my side, his voice filled with joy and expectation. I'm happy for you, Max, I replied, my voice cracking with mixed emotions. I'll be there, of course. As the wedding preparations unfolded, I found myself more an outsider than a part of my brother's life. Actually, Emily took control of everything, her assertive nature leaving no room for anyone else's opinion. Emily said, So Chloe, we've chosen the bridesmaid dresses. You'll look stunning in this, holding up a dress that I knew would not suit me. I tried to voice my opinion, but Emily cut me off. Oh, don't be so fussy, Chloe. It's just a dress. It's our big day after all. The wedding day arrived, and the tension was palpable. Guests filled the beautiful garden, the air thick with anticipation and perfume. I stood beside Max, my heart heavy with unspoken words and unacknowledged feelings. You look beautiful, Chloe, Max whispered, his voice gentle. Thank you, Max. You look very handsome, I replied, forcing a smile. Emily made her grand entrance, all eyes on her. She looked radiant, confident, and completely in control. As the ceremony proceeded, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing my brother forever. The vows were exchanged, the rings were placed, and Max and Emily were pronounced husband and wife. At the reception, Emily's true colors began to show. She teased and taunted me, her words sharp and malicious. Chloe, I hope you're not too lonely now that Max is mine, she said, a wicked smile playing on her lips. I just want Max to be happy, I replied, trying to maintain my composure. Oh, he's happy. All right. He's happier than he's ever been with you smothering him, she retorted, her eyes glinting with triumph. I looked to Max for support, but he was caught in the whirlwind of celebration, oblivious to Emily's behavior. The evening wore on, each moment stretching into an eternity. A Tokely and Criery to dance, the toasts, the laughter, it all seemed hollow and forced. My heart ached with the realization that my relationship with Max had irrevocably changed. As I drove home that night, the memories of the wedding played in my mind like a haunting melody. I knew that Max and Emily's marriage marked a turning point, a shift in the tides of our lives. I was no longer the most important person in Max's life. Emily had taken that place, and with it, she had brought a darkness that would soon overshadow everything we had built together. The chapter of the wedding was over, but the story was far from finished. That the seeds of resentment, betrayal, and revenge had been sown, and the storm was yet to come. In the months following the wedding, the bond between Max and me grew more tenuous. Our interactions became strained, filled with unspoken grievances and suppressed emotions. Emily's presence loomed large, a constant barrier between us. One day, I went to visit Max at his house, bearing my customary monthly gift of $4,000. I was met with a hostility I hadn't expected. "Chloe, why do you insist on coming over like this?" "Emily doesn't like it," Max said, his voice tight with frustration. "I'm just trying to help." "Bates, you know I've always supported you financially," I replied, taken aback by his tone. "Axella, Emily thinks it's time for me to be more independent, to stop relying on you," Max said, avoiding my eyes. "Is that what Emily thinks, or is that what you think?" I shot back, my patience wearing thin. Max's face flushed with anger. "Why do you always have to make everything about you?" "Chloe, maybe it's time you let go and let me live my own life." I was stunned by his words, a cold chill settling over me. "I've always supported you, Babes. I've been there for you every step of the way. And now you want to push me away." "Max, it's not about pushing you away. Chloe, it's about growing up and making my own decisions," Max said, his voice softening. "But at what cost?" "Max, at the cost of our relationship," I asked, tears welling in my eyes. We stood there, facing each other, the silence thick with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Finally, Max spoke, his voice filled with a sadness I hadn't heard before. "Max, Chloe, I love you, but Emily's my wife now. I need to make her my priority."
His words hit me like a physical blow, a clear declaration of where his loyalties now lay.
As the weeks went on, the chasm between us grew wider. I continued to visit Max and Emily, each time met with increasing hostility. Emily's barbs became more vicious, her disdain more apparent. "Emily, Chloe, why don't you find someone of your own instead of clinging to Max?" Emily sneered one day, her eyes filled with contempt. "I'm not clinging to anyone." "Emily, Max is my family. Something you clearly don't understand," I retorted, my anger bubbling to the surface. The quarrels became more frequent, the atmosphere more toxic. Emily's influence over Max was complete, her manipulations tearing at the fabric of our relationship. The house that I had bought with so much love had become a battleground, a place where trust and affection were replaced by resentment and betrayal. The chapter of our strained relationship was a painful one, filled with loss, confusion, and a growing sense of injustice. My brother, my confidant, had become a stranger, and I was left to grapple with the reality of our broken bond. But beneath the surface, a fire was kindling, a determination taking root. Emily had taken my brother from me, had turned our love into something bitter and twisted. I knew that the time for passive acceptance was over. The time for revenge was drawing near. The storm was coming, and I was ready to face it head-on. As the seasons changed, the tension between Emily, Max, and me continued to escalate. That's the house that I had once bought with love and hope had become a battlefield, a place filled with anger and resentment. I still went to visit them, still handed over the $4,000 every month, but each visit was more painful than the last. Emily's taunts were relentless, her cruelty knowing no bounds. One day, I arrived at the house to find Emily in a particularly foul mood. Her eyes were cold, her words biting. Emily, Chloe, I don't know why you keep coming here. We don't want you. Your money's nice, but you can leave it at the door and go. She spat, her voice dripping with malice. I felt a surge of anger, but I kept my composure. Document, Emily, I don't know what I've done to deserve this treatment. I've always tried to be kind to you, to support you and Max. Emily, kind? You call this kind? She snapped, waving the money in my face. This is control. Chloe, you think you can buy our love, buy our loyalty? I looked to Max, my eyes pleading for support. But his face was a mask, his eyes averted. At me, Max, please tell her that's not true. I'll tell her how much we've been through together, how much I love you, I begged, my voice breaking. Max's face was pained, his voice hesitant. Max, Chloe, maybe it's time to let go. Emily's right, we need to live our lives without your interference. The room spun, his words cutting me to the core. I had lost him, lost my brother to Emily's manipulations. I never interfered. Babes, I only wanted what was best for you, I stammered, tears streaming down my face. Max, what's best for me is what I decide. Chloe Chekniam. Not you. But anymore, he said, his voice firm, final. Emily's laugh was harsh, triumphant. Emily, you heard him. Chloe. I'll leave. I stood there, my heart shattered, my world crumbling around me. I had given everything for Max, had sacrificed so much for his happiness. And now, I was being cast aside, rejected by the very person I loved most. Apparemment because knows as Epor creation, I hope you'll be happy. Max, I whispered, my voice filled with defeat. I hope you'll never regret this. With those words, I turned and left, my footsteps heavy, my soul crushed. That was the breaking point. At the moment when I knew that things could never be the same again. Emily had won, had taken my brother from me and turned him against me. But she had also awakened something within me, something fierce and determined. I knew that I could not let her actions go unanswered. The time for tears was over. The time for revenge had come. As I drove away from the house, a plan began to take shape in my mind. Emily had taken everything from me, had broken my heart and my trust. But I still had one thing she didn't have, the deeds to the house. The legal right to take back what was mine. The storm was brewing, and I was ready to face it. Emily and Max would pay for their betrayal. They would learn that revenge was a game I was willing to play, and I would play to win. The week that followed was one of determination and preparation. I sought legal counsel and gathered all the necessary documents to prove my ownership of the house. The once cherished gift to my brother had become a symbol of betrayal, and I was resolved to reclaim it. The day finally arrived when I went back to the house. My heart pounded as I approached the door, but my resolve was unwavering. I knocked firmly, and Emily answered, her face contorted with rage. The day finally arrived when I went back to the house. Emily, I told you never to come back here. The house belongs to me. Emily, I have the deeds. You and Max have 1 week to leave, or we'll take this to court. X appeared behind Emily, his face pale, his eyes wide. Max, Chloe, please, let's talk about this. You can't just throw us out. Oh, it's me. I can. Wait. And I will. You both made your choice. Now you must live with the consequences. Emily, you'll regret this. Chloe, you'll regret ever crossing me. I already regret trusting you, I replied, turning and leaving them to their fate. The week passed, and true to their nature, Emily and Max refused to leave. The matter went to court, and the trial that ensued was a tense, emotional affair. In the courtroom, I faced my brother, his face drawn, his eyes filled with fear and confusion. Emily's arrogance was undiminished, her defiance unwavering. My lawyer presented the evidence, the deeds to the house, the proof of my financial support. Emily's attempts to fight back were futile, her lies unraveling under scrutiny. Lawyer, Your Honor, it's clear that Ms. Chloe is the rightful owner of the house. She bought it with her own money, and her generosity has been met with betrayal and contempt. My lawyer argued, his voice firm. Emily's lawyer struggled to counter the evidence, his arguments weak and unconvincing. The judge's verdict was clear and unequivocal. In light of the evidence presented, I find in favor of Miss Chloe. Mr. Max and Mrs. Emily are ordered to vacate the house and pay $50,000 in compensation. The gavel's fall was like a hammer blow to Emily's defiance, a sweet note of justice to my ears. I looked at Max, searching for some sign of the brother I once knew. His face was a mask of defeat, his eyes filled with remorse. Max, Chloe, I'm so sorry, he whispered, his voice broken. Sorry doesn't change what you've done. Max, I replied, my voice filled with a sadness I couldn't shake. And with that, I walked away, my revenge complete, justice served. The house was mine again, but it was a hollow victory. My relationship with my brother was shattered, perhaps forever. That door of revenge was closed, but the wounds remained, deep and unhealed. Emily's influence had taken its toll, and I was left to pick up the pieces of a broken family. But in the midst of the pain there was also strength, a newfound resilience. I had stood up for myself, had fought back against betrayal and injustice. that the road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it, knowing that I had the strength to endure, the courage to fight, and the wisdom to move on. The story of Chloe and Emily was a tale of love and betrayal, of generosity and greed, of family and loss. It was a story of choices and consequences, a lesson in the power of revenge and the price of justice. In the end, I was victorious, but the victory was bittersweet. The house was mine, but the family was lost. Revenge was satisfying, but justice was cold. And yet, I knew that I had done what I had to do. I had taken control of my destiny, had reclaimed what was mine. And in doing so, I found a strength I never knew I had, a determination to live my life on my own terms. For that, I was grateful. For that, I was strong. For that, I was free. They begged for forgiveness, but it was too late. Akin in a world of pixelated fantasies and the relentless buzz of social media notifications, I found solace in a love that felt authentic. My name is Emma, and this is my story. It begins with joy, then spirals into a tragedy of my own making, all because I believed in the illusion of love. Daniel and I met at a mutual friend's wedding. The setting sun had turned the sky into an artist's palette of oranges and pinks, and laughter filled the air like the tinkling of wind chimes. It was poetic, almost cinematic, the way your eyes met across the crowd. He was impeccably dressed, his tailored suit hugging his frame like it was made just for him, which it probably was. Angel High.com Plast. I'm Daniel, he introduced himself, offering a hand that was as warm as his smile. Me, Emma, I said, taking his hand and feeling an instant connection. From that day on, we were inseparable. He wooed me in the most charming ways. Surprise dates, handwritten love letters, even a serenade under my window one night, which would have been embarrassing if it wasn't so endearing. I thought I'd found my soulmate, my partner in life, and couldn't wait to begin our journey together. Then there was Angela, Daniel's mother. She was the sort of woman whose presence you could feel even before you saw her. The first time I met her was at a family dinner Daniel had arranged so we could all get acquainted. Angela. So you're the Emma we've heard so much about, Angela said, looking me up and down like I was some sort of exhibit. You're prettier in the photos. I laughed nervously, not sure how to respond. Daniel jumped in, oblivious to his mother's cutting remark. Daniel, Mom, come on, isn't she beautiful? Angela forced a smile. Angela? Oh, I didn't mean it that way, dear. You know how photos always enhance our looks. Oh, offense meant. Peeing and Situlin, and as our relationship progressed and the wedding plans started, the digs and snipes from Angela escalated. As fittings turned into minefields, the choice of flowers became a battleground, and the guest list felt like a game of Russian roulette. Angela, you should invite your second cousin. Antri, he's a lawyer, you know, Angela would often suggest, subtly implying that my family's lack of pedigree was a stain on their otherwise illustrious lineage. Daniel was no help, dismissing it as just the way she is. Finally, the wedding day arrived. I was a bundle of nerves and excitement, my stomach a whirlpool of butterflies and hope. But even on this day, Angela couldn't resist taking a jab at me. "Angela, Emma, it's surprising you managed to wear white," she whispered as I was about to walk down the aisle. I looked at her, shocked and hurt. At me? What's that supposed to mean? Daniel, standing beside me, chuckled. "Daniel. Oh, Mom, you're so funny." Funny. I couldn't believe he found it amusing. But I let it go. It was my wedding day, after all, a day for love, unity, and the beginning of a new chapter in life. How was I to know then that this chapter would be one of despair and loneliness? The illusion of love is a powerful thing. Hence, it can make you overlook red flags, ignore your instincts, and put your faith in fairy tales. Unsure as I walked down the aisle, my heart full of love and eyes brimming with tears of happiness. I had no idea that the woman smirking behind her son's back would soon turn my life into a living nightmare. In that moment, I was the epitome of blissful ignorance, floating on a cloud of romantic ideals. I didn't see the storm on the horizon, didn't recognize the omen that was Angela or the complacency that was Daniel. And so, with a heart full of love and a head full of dreams, I stepped into what I thought was my forever. I was gravely mistaken. When Daniel and I returned from our honeymoon, a magical 2 weeks in Bali, I was still floating on cloud 9. We moved into my house, a charming 2-story I had purchased before meeting him. It was in a quiet neighborhood, and I had put a lot of effort into making it a home. Little did I know, it was about to become the stage for my daily torment. Angela's visits began almost immediately, and the pattern was always the same. She'd arrive unannounced, wearing an expression of disapproval like it was part of her ensemble. "Angela, Emma darling, you really should consider getting new curtains. These are dreadfully out of style," she'd say within seconds of walking in. "But Mama, actually, I like them," I would respond, holding my tongue and temper. Daniel would usually jump in with, "Daniel and Mom's got a point. Emma." It was maddening. I critiqued everything. My cooking, my choices in furniture, even the way I folded laundry. And according to Angela, I couldn't do anything right. Like suggestions, I cooked a special 3-course meal, putting hours into preparation and presentation. Angela's reaction was nothing short of devastating. "Angela, did you actually make this? Or is this takeout disguised as home cooking?" She scoffed, taking a tiny bite from her fork and then pushing the plate away. "Ating stiffkman, I made it. Angela, I thought you'd like it," I said, trying to hide the hurt in my voice. Daniel, as always, sided with his mother. At Tabalat's question, "Daniel, Emma, if Mom says it could be better, it's because she has experience. Don't take it personally." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I looked from Daniel to Angela, both wearing matching smirks. It was as if they were in this together, a tag team set to bring me down. As time went on, the snide remarks and veiled insults became increasingly difficult to brush off. Angela critiqued my clothes, the cleanliness of the house, and even questioned my ability to make Daniel happy in the long run. Daniel has always had such high standards, you know. His ex-girlfriend, Catherine, was a wonderful cook and an excellent homemaker, she'd say, sipping her tea with an air of arrogance. Dean, well, I'm not Catherine, and Daniel chose to be with me. Daniel shrugged, looking apathetic rather than supportive. And Daniel, Caffeine was good at those things. Emma, but you have other qualities. Those other qualities were never specified. It was always about what I lacked, never about what I brought into Daniel's life. A criticism escalated with each visit. I felt scrutinized in my own home, as if I was a guest rather than the person who actually owned the place. Each time the doorbell rang, and I found Angela at the door, my stomach sank and a sense of impending doom settled over me. It was like living on the edge, never knowing when the next insult or critique would come, but knowing that it was only a matter of time. Angela's behavior and Daniel's complacency took a toll on me. It was exhausting to constantly defend myself and my choices in my own home. But more than that, it was heartbreaking to see the man I loved, the man I had committed my life to, allowing his mother to belittle me at every turn. My home had become a battlefield, and I was losing ground with each passing day. As Angela continued to mark her territory with her toxic comments, and Daniel simply stood by. I knew something had to change. I just didn't know how bad things would get before they did. In that house, surrounded by my things yet feeling utterly displaced, I slowly began to see the truth. Sisters, I was not an equal in this relationship. I was an intruder in a story that had been written long before I entered the scene. The worst part? The next act was about to begin, and it was a plot twist I never saw coming. The day Angela became a permanent fixture in my home started like any other. I was in the kitchen, trying out a new recipe that I hoped would meet the lofty standards of my household critics, when the door swung open. I turned, and there was Angela, rolling in a suitcase behind her. My heart sank into my stomach like a stone thrown into a pond. Angela, I hope you don't mind, darling, she began, a sly grin spreading across her face, but my building is being renovated for the next few months. I thought it'd be a nice opportunity for some family bonding. I was stunned, looking at Daniel for some sign that this was a joke. Are you serious? I blurted out. Daniel shifted his weight uncomfortably before speaking. Daniel. Well, Emma, Mom does need a place to stay, and we have the space. It's the right thing to do. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. At me to nix the plan in me. The right thing to do? Daniel, she can't just move in without asking us. Asking me. Angela chuckled softly. Until oh, Emma, you're part of this family now. You should learn to share. That was the moment when my life turned into an endless nightmare, like a record stuck on a loop, replaying the worst parts over and over again. Babblesome secretions, the weeks that followed were a blur of ceaseless demands, constant bickering and unrelenting stress. Angela, Emma, I've put my clothes in the wash. Could be a dear and hang them for me, won't you? And ping them for me, won't you? Angela would command, as if it was my duty to serve her. Abtidin, Daniel, a permanent. I don't think it's fair that I have to do chores for your mother, especially without being consulted on her moving in. I tried to reason with him one evening. He looked at me as if I had asked for the moon. Daniel, Emma, she's my mother. We have to take care of her. But at what cost? Daniel, at the cost of our marriage? At the cost of my sanity? I shot back, my patience eroding away like a cliffside battered by a relentless sea. A tenethra into Daniel's side, running his fingers through his hair in frustration. Daniel, can't you just get along with her? You're making things difficult for no reason. And so, this time I became the unpaid maid, the emotional punching bag, and the scapegoat for all of Angela's whims and fancies. I cleaned after her, cooked for her, and even put up with her constant nitpicking about how I should be living my life. Angela, Emma, you really should consider going on a diet. A woman must maintain her figure, especially now that you're a married woman, she'd say, eyeing me from head to toe with a critical glare. Or during one of the rare moments when I sat down to relax, Angela, Emma, you're wasting time. Shouldn't you be doing something productive, like learning to cook a proper meal or tending to your husband's needs? But despite being the breadwinner, supporting both Daniel and Angela, since neither had a job, my value was reduced to what I could do around the house. They seemed oblivious to the fact that I was juggling a high-paying job and household chores, while also suffering from emotional and psychological abuse on a daily basis. Daniel, you really should get a job. Emma, Daniel said one evening with an air of self-righteousness, as if he was completely unaware that my income was the reason we could afford our lifestyle. Daniel and Angela had built an alliance that I couldn't penetrate, a fortress designed to keep me out while exploiting me at the same time. As I looked around the home that no longer felt like mine, one thing became crystal clear. I had to escape this prison they had created for me, but not without making them regret the day they took me for granted. I had been pushed to my limits, and now it was time for retribution. After all, they say revenge is a dish best served cold. And I was about to serve it ice cold. The days melded into one long gray smear. Time felt like it had stretched and elongated, each second a tiny eternity. I was in survival mode, functioning on autopilot. Work offered a little escape, but even there I was plagued by the thought of returning to the house at the end of the day, a house that had become my prison. A typical day began with Angela barging into our room. No knock, no courtesy, just a full-on invasion. Angela, wake up. Emma, breakfast won't make itself, she'd announce as if she was the warden in this twisted jail. It's with a heavy sigh. I get out of bed and drag myself to the kitchen. Daniel would already be there, sipping his coffee, immersed in his phone. Daniel. Morning, he'd murmur, not bothering to look up. The routine was stifling. Prepare breakfast, clean up, get ready for work, endure backhanded compliments or outright insults, head to work, come home, cook dinner, more criticism, and sleep. If I could even call tossing and turning in bed sleep. While I was making dinner one evening, Angela walked into the kitchen, scrutinizing every move I made. And to let you know, Emma, you really should take some cooking classes. You have a lot to learn if you're going to keep a man happy. Angela, cooking doesn't keep a man happy. The love, respect, and mutual support do, I retorted, fed up with her archaic views. She chuckled. Angela, you're naive if you think that's all it takes. A woman needs to know her place, and part of that is ensuring her man is well fed and satisfied. Just then, Daniel walked in. Daniel smells great. Emma. Before I could answer, Angela jumped in. Daniel nodded, almost robotically. Daniel, well, practice makes perfect, right? In that moment, I felt a twinge of something I hadn't felt in a while. Resentment towards Daniel. Here he was, supposed to be my partner, the person who should have my back, yet he was letting his mother dismantle my self-esteem brick by brick. Weekends were no better. They were an extended version of the nightmare that was my life, minus the brief respite work provided. On Sundays, Angela had a new ritual, family cleaning day. Angela, Emma, I noticed the baseboards are quite dusty. And when was the last time these windows were cleaned? Angela would start her list of chores, handed out like decrees from a queen to her serfs. I cleaned the windows last weekend, I'd say barely keeping the irritation out of my voice. Daniel would chime in and yell, well, if Mom says they're dirty, you must have missed a spot. Angela smirked triumphantly. The chin, it was as if I had become a modern-day Cinderella with chores piling up and a step-family constantly criticizing me. That there was no fairy godmother on the horizon, no magical transformation, and most distressingly, no prince. Daniel had become a stranger, a spectator in the suffering that his mother orchestrated and relished. How had it come to this? When had I become this shell of a person, meekly taking this degradation? Each day felt like another layer of me was being peeled away, leaving behind a raw, vulnerable core. Each day felt like another layer of me was being peeled away, leaving behind a raw, vulnerable core. And then it hit me. I was allowing this to happen. I was giving them the power to break me down, to make me feel insignificant in my own life. And it was time to take that power back. It was as if a dormant part of me suddenly woke up, a part that I had buried deep within in the name of love and family. The part was angry, and it demanded justice. It screamed for revenge. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, a plan started to form in my mind. A plan to reclaim my life, my home, and my dignity. A plan that would turn the tables and give Angela and Daniel a taste of their own bitter medicine. They had pushed me into a corner, but they had forgotten one thing. Even a cornered animal will fight when it has nothing left to lose. And fight I would. that fateful evening start like any other. I returned from work, mentally drained but physically restless, steeling myself for the icy atmosphere that had become the norm in my own home. But the scent of something burning greeted me as I opened the door. I rushed to the kitchen and found Angela angrily stirring a pot on the stove, an inferno of disdain in her eyes. "Angela's, finally you're home," she spat out the words. "I tried cooking dinner, but I can't work with this low-quality kitchenware you have." He's fuming but determined to hold my ground. I responded, "If you don't like my kitchen, Angela, you're more than welcome not to use it." Just as the words left my mouth, Daniel walked in. "Astrincalative to a tooth pencil, what's going on here?" "Angela, ask your wife." Angela shot back, tossing the wooden spoon into the sink with a clang. Her cheap taste in kitchenware is the culprit. Ignoring his mother, Daniel turned to me. "Daniel, Emma, you know better than to buy low-quality stuff. What were you thinking?" That was the straw that broke the camel's back. What was I thinking? I was thinking that I'd use my hard-earned money to provide for this household while both of you sit around doing nothing. Daniel's face turned a shade of red that I had never seen before. "Daniel, you ungrateful woman. Do you think money is everything? And about you're a gold digger, that's what you are." Angela jumped in, a venomous smile forming on her lips. "Angela, I told you." "Daniel, she was only after your potential inheritance." Looks like I was right. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. Me, I'm a gold digger. You both live under my roof, eat the food I buy, and use the amenities I pay for. And yet, I'm a gold digger. Mikey, I'm a gold digger? You both live under my roof, eat the food I buy, and use the amenities I pay for. And yet, I'm a gold digger?
Angela scoffed. "Angela, this was never your house. It's Daniel's house."
That's where you're wrong," I retorted, my eyes meeting Daniel's. "This house is in my name, bought with my money. You both are nothing more than guests here, and it's time you started acting like it." Angela looked like she had been slapped. Daniel seemed lost for words. I seized the moment to lay down the law. "Daniel, if you can't respect me, your wife in my own home, then you have no place here. And Angela, if you think you can bully me in my sanctuary, you're gravely mistaken."
Daniel seemed to snap back to reality. "Daniel, you can't kick us out. I'm your husband."
Like me, I can and I will. I've been speaking to a lawyer, preparing for this moment. I've been documenting every insult, every instance of harassment, every time you both made me feel worthless in my own home. If you think you can walk all over me, you're in for a rude awakening." Silence filled the room. Angela looked like she had swallowed a lemon, and Daniel stared at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. Me, that's it. I want both of you out. I'll be filing for divorce. Daniel and I will be pressing charges for emotional distress. Angela, as I walked away, Angela called after me, her voice tinged with desperation. "Angela, you'll regret this. Emma, you'll die alone." I turned around, locking eyes with her. I'd rather be alone than spend another second in this toxic environment you've created. Get out of my house. And with that, I retreated to my room, my body trembling, but my spirit unbreakable. This was the turning point. A chain from here on out. I was taking back control of my life, and God help anyone who stood in my way. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer's number. It was time to set the wheels of justice in motion. I was done being the victim. It was time to become the architect of their comeuppance. Courtrooms have an air of finality about them. The wooden benches, the judge's high seat, the solemnity that permeates the room. Everything screams of decisions that can't be undone. As I sat there, dressed in my most professional attire, I looked over at Daniel and Angela. And for the first time, they seemed out of their element, nervous and unsure. My lawyer, Claire, was an embodiment of professional tenacity. When she presented my case, complete with the endless accounts of harassment, emotional abuse, and financial leeching, it was ironclad. She brought up evidence, texts, voice recordings, and even some security footage from our home that showed the severity of their behavior. Claire, Your Honor, my client has been subjected to relentless emotional and psychological abuse under her own roof. Moreover, she has been the primary financial provider, which makes this not just a case of domestic abuse, but also of financial exploitation. Daniel's lawyer stuttered through his defense. Lawyer, Your Honor, while it's true that there have been disagreements between my client and his wife, labeling it as abuse is an exaggeration. The judge looked unimpressed. Judge, exaggeration or not, Mrs. Thompson has provided substantial evidence which warrants not only the divorce but also damages for emotional distress. Mr. Thompson. Mrs. Thompson's request for a $30,000 settlement for emotional distress is approved. And for the record, I suggest you get your act together. Post-trial, as we gathered our papers, Angela approached me, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Angela, you destroyed our family. Emma, are you happy now? I looked her square in the eyes. Gil, your actions destroyed this family. I just brought it into the light. And yes, I'm content knowing that justice has been served. Daniel looked like a man who had been stripped of his armor, vulnerable and defeated. Daniel, Emma, you didn't have to do this. That could work things out. That's me, worked things out? You never worked anything out. Daniel, you just sided with your mother and allowed her to treat me like trash in my own home. This was long overdue. Without another word, I turned my back on them and walked out of the courtroom, feeling lighter than I had in months. I had won, not just the case but my self-respect and freedom. That evening the house was eerily quiet. And for the first time in a long time, it was peaceful. No snide remarks, no passive-aggressive jabs, just tranquility. I poured myself a glass of wine, relishing the taste of victory. As I sat on the porch, I received a message from Claire. The court order has been executed. They have 48 hours to vacate your property. And vacate they did. Watching them leave, their faces twisted in humiliation. I felt no joy, no triumphant exhilaration. What I felt was a calm sense of closure. They had underestimated me, and they had paid the price. As I closed the door behind them, I took a deep breath, savoring the newfound emptiness of my home, a void that I could now fill with love, respect, and peace. It didn't take long for the word to get out. My story was an emblematic tale of reclaiming one's dignity against all odds. Friends and colleagues who had distanced themselves during my dark days started reaching out, offering words of support and admiration. That the sweetest revenge wasn't the money or even the public disgrace that Daniel and Angela had to endure. The sweetest revenge was my regained sense of self, the knowledge that I was not broken or defeated. I had stood up against my oppressors, and I had won. Just in the end, revenge wasn't about making them suffer. It was about making sure that I never suffered again. I had fought for my freedom and had earned it, every last bit of it. This chapter of my life was finally closed, sealed with the gavel's last bang in a courtroom that smelled of wood and justice. And as for the next chapter, that was yet to be written. But one thing was clear: I was the one who would be holding the pen. Years had passed since the courtroom drama that had reshaped my life. My existence was a far cry from the emotional and psychological cesspool it had once been. I climbed the corporate ladder, secured a position that not only paid well, but also gave me a profound sense of accomplishment. My home was exactly that, a home filled with tranquility, free from the toxic chains that had once bound me. I spent my days focusing on what mattered: my career, my well-being, and the relationships with family and friends who genuinely cared for me. As for Daniel and Angela, they had become mere footnotes in a chapter I had long closed. But as fate would have it, our paths were destined to cross one last time. It was a chilly evening, and I was walking back home after a gratifying day at work. Taking a shortcut through a less frequented alley, I noticed a disheveled figure huddled against the brick wall, surrounded by empty bottles and remnants of a life gone awry. As I walked closer, my heart skipped a beat. Our eyes met. He opened his mouth as if to speak but couldn't find the words. Daniel, Emma. I don't need an apology. Daniel, what's done is done. He sighed, looking down at the ground. Daniel, I never thought life would come to this. After you kicked us out, nobody wanted to help. That's how even relatives turned their backs. My mom moved in with some distant cousins, and He sighed, looking down at the ground. No, I was wrong. Emma, I was so wrong about so many things. For a moment, a part of me wanted to feel pity for him. But that emotion was fleeting, quickly overshadowed by the memory of what he and his mother had done to me. For a moment, a part of me wanted to feel pity for him, but that emotion was fleeting, quickly overshadowed by the memory of what he and his mother had done to me. Out of me, I hope you take this as a lesson. Daniel, life has a way of teaching us what we refuse to learn willingly. You and your mother had numerous chances to do right by me, but you chose otherwise. And here we are. I take it in, Daniel. Is there any way to make it right? Can we start anew? I paused, pondering his words. It would have been so easy to take him back, to show the world that I was the bigger person. But some bridges are burned not for the sake of pettiness, but for the sake of peace. No Denalsi can't start anew. Our paths diverged a long time ago. It's better for both of us to go our separate ways. And with that, I turned my back on him and walked away. His sobs faded into the background, drowned out by the sound of my heels clicking on the pavement, each step taking me further away from my past and closer to a future I had built for myself. I felt neither vindication nor guilt. Instead, what I felt was a sense of profound understanding that our lives had come full circle. We're both reaping what we had sowed, albeit in starkly different ways. I had sown seeds of resilience and self-respect, and in return, life had given me a field full of opportunities and happiness. Daniel, on the other hand, had sown seeds of disrespect and entitlement, and life had left him with a barren field of despair. As I reached my home, that beautiful sanctuary built on the foundations of my hard work and perseverance, I realized that the best revenge had never been about making Daniel or Angela suffer. That's a fear, Sesames. It was about flourishing despite them, about building a life so full that their absence became an afterthought. So when I closed my front door behind me, it wasn't just a wooden frame that shut behind me. It was the final chapter of a turbulent past. I was ready to write new chapters, free from the shadows of Daniel and Angela, emboldened by the strength that had come from overcoming them. I took off my heels, poured myself a glass of fine wine, and raised a silent toast to the woman I had become. A survivor, a victor, a woman reborn. And so life moved on, as it always does. But one thing was certain, whatever came my way, I was ready. After all, I had faced the worst and emerged not just unbroken, but stronger, wiser, and indomitably free. The circle was complete, and so was I.